want to start looking at a few things, and the things that we're going to look at now is called financial mathematics. So let me bring that up. It is called financial mathematics, right? And what sections are we going to look at in financial maths? Well, we're going to look at decay and interest, right? We're going to look at decay. We are also going to look at interest. Okay, and then we're going to a little bit later on look at applications of how to use simple and compound decay and interest. For both of these, we're going to start looking into simple interest as well as compound interest, and then we're going to look at where do we find their applications. Okay, now remember, the very important thing is you need to learn actively. So don't just watch the videos, because watching my videos is like training for a marathon by watching other people run the marathon, and that's not how it works. You need to work with the videos, play, pause, rewind, take down the notes, and learn actively and ensure that you engrave a neural pattern. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I just want to set up a table over here, and we can use this table to draw some comparisons in terms of what we're going to be looking at. Right. Okay, and remember, you should be making the notes as well. Okay, so there we go. So let's label this. I'm going to call this simple, and I'm going to call this compound. And then I'm going to start focusing on decay appreciation. I'm going to call this over here interest, and I'm going to call this decay. Right, and then we're going to start speaking about each of them. Okay, so let's quickly talk about what is interest. Well, interest, you should already know by now, is that you gain interest on investments, or you could also be charged interest on loans. And so think about it, we gain interest in terms of investments, and we can also be charged interests when we take out loans. So those are two places in which we will find this. And then other than that, we can talk about decay. Now, what type of decay are we talking about? We're talking about decay in terms of depreciation, right? This is when something loses value. So for example, when I bought this mobile phone, it was worth 10,000 Rand, for argument's sake. Today it is worth 2,000 Rand, and we say that the phone's value has depreciated. So that's decay, right? Depreciation. And we will talk about how things depreciate. Another word for interest, or another thing that we can look at in interest, is appreciation, is when we look at things appreciating in value, right? Either the value increases or the price goes up. For example, when we talk about the increase in value in terms of your home. So in both of these cases, we'll be talking about simple and also compound interest or appreciation, and compound or simple decay or depreciation. Now, what are the things with regards to simple versus compound? Right? Simple versus compound. Well, let us start over here. When we talk about simple interest, right, this is called this is also called straight line appreciation. Right? Straight line. Okay? And when we look at compound interest, we're talking actually about an exponential function. Okay. So let's take an example where we start speaking about interest. If I talk about interest, right? And let's say I place in 100,000 Rand in an investment, right? And I'm going to earn a monthly interest rate of 10% simple interest. Now, simple interest simply means that we're going to take the initial value, or the value, or 10% of the principal amount. This is my original amount over here. I'm going to invest 100,000 Rand, and I'm going to look at 10% of 100,000. Now 10% of 100,000 is what? And that's what I'm going to gain. At the end of the first month, how much would I have? I would have an extra 10% of the original amount. And in this particular case, that's going to be 10,000 Rand. Okay. Now, if I go further and I consider this, let's say that means my balance at the end of that is going to be 110,000 Rand. Now, again, we will then increase the amount by 10% plus 10% of the original amount, which I'm going to just call P. So I'm going to say add an extra 10% of P, right? Which in this particular case is going to be the following. It's going to be plus another 10,000 Rand. And now the big question is, how much money do we get at the end of 2 months? Well, the resultant would be 120,000 Rands. Okay. Now, how does compound interest differ? Well, the idea is that we don't look at a percentage of the original value. We look at a percentage of what we can call the carrying value, right? A percentage of the carrying value. Now again, I'm going to look at compound interest. If I want to consider compound interest, let me start by saying again, we start off by investing 100,000 Rands, okay, plus 10% of 100,000 Rands. That's going to be 10% compounded interest. That's what we're interested in over here. And I'm going to add 10,000 to that. When I add 10,000, what do I get? Well, 10% of 100,000 is 10,000. Now the question is, what is the balance at the end of that? Let's insert the balance there. The balance will then be 110,000. Okay, but now we're going to add 10% of carrying value, or the value at which we have this closing value over here. And 10% of 110,000 is going to be 11,000 Rands, which we will add as such, and let's just get blue marker over there. And now the big question is, how much is that? Well, you can say, Imad, that's going to be at the end of 2 months. At the end of the first month, I made 10,000. At the end of the second month on my investment, I now gained an extra 10%, which is going to be 11,000 Rand added to that. And that gives me 121,000 Rand. If we go further, we can say at the end of the third year, I'm going to earn an extra 10% of this amount, which is going to be 12,100. Right? And then what does that give me as a total? That's going to be 133,100 Rand. And if you were to add here another 10% of the original amount on this side, that's going to give me another plus 10,000, which gives me the following. I'm going to have a total of 130,000. So the big question is, when we talk about interest or appreciation, what type of interest works more in your favor? Is it simple interest or compound interest? And the answer is compound interest would work better because you are gaining on the closing value. You're gaining on the value at which it is at the end of every month or the end of every year. Okay. Let's look at an example of simple versus compound depreciation. Okay, I'm looking at simple versus compound, and I'm going to focus on depreciation now. Let's just go one back. There we go. I'm talking about depreciation, right? And again, depreciation. Right. Okay. So let's take my mobile phone and we are going to depreciate it at 10%, right? And this is going to be at 10% compounded, compound interest, and this is going to be at 10% simple interest. 10% at simple. Okay. Right. And so let's look at each of those individually. Let's take my mobile phone. I'm going to consider P as the original price or original value of 10,000 Rands. Okay, and again over here, P 10,000 Rands. Remember, P is just our original value of my mobile phone. So remember, once we've pulled off 10%, we look at the new balance and then we pull off 10% again. When I consider simple interest, I take the same percentage from the original value each time. Okay, so at the end of month 1, let us look at this now. The value at this is now 10,000 Rand. After the first month, it loses minus, right? We're just going to take that out there. It loses a value of 10%, which is going to be 1,000 Rand. And now the new value is, the value of my mobile phone is 9,000 Rand. Okay. Now simple interest says you take the percentage of the original value. Again, if I now reduce it further and it's going to lose or depreciate in its value, it's going to lose another 1,000 Rand at the end of the second month. So this will be the depreciation for the, let's make it end of first month. Okay, and we will continue to go end of the second month and so forth. Now let me subtract. 10,000 minus 1,000 gives me 9,000, and here it's going to lose another 1,000 Rand, which means its value will sit at 8,000 Rands. Okay, and so forth. That's end of second month. Okay, and then if it loses or continues to lose value, it's going to lose another 1,000 Rand end of the third month, which now leaves us with the following. It leaves us with a value of 7,000 Rand. Now remember, we're talking about depreciation here. Here we were talking about appreciation or interest. When it gains interest, again, compound interest works in your favor because you're gaining more. When your properties decrease or devalue, or your assets devalue, decay or compound depreciation works a lot better because you're losing value but you lose less. Whereas in appreciation, you gain, but you gain more with compound. Depreciation, you lose, but you lose less with compound interest. Okay, compound decay. Let's look at another example over here. I started with 10,000 Rand original value. Okay, I'm going to lose 10% of the value of that item, which goes as follows, minus 1,000. Okay, which now gives me a value of the following. I will now have a remainder, or an object valued at 9,000 Rands. And now if we lose at the end of the first month, you can see the value is the same, right? End of the first month. It's going to depreciate further. By how much? By 10% of the carrying value. So we look at 10% of 9,000, which is 900. And we look at this now and we say 9,000 minus 900 gives me a value of 8,100. And then if it depreciates further, we can say, well, okay, it's going to lose another 10% of its value, which is going to be only 810. And then we can work that out and see how much the value. And in this case, my asset or my mobile phone will be valued at 7,290 Rands. Okay, so at the end of 3 years, or end of 3 months in this particular case, that's the value of my item when I consider compound depreciation. And on this side, the value of my item is 7,000 when I look at simple depreciation. Now let's look at alternative names for when we talk about decay. I want to first give you the formulae. So instead of working out things the long way that we've done now, there are short ways of doing so. So let's see what those are. Simple interest, there's a formula. It says the following. It is A equals P1 plus I multiplied by N. Compound interest is A equals P1 plus I to the power of N. Right, 1 plus I raised to the N. Let's just take that out there. Okay. For decay, we simply depreciate the item and say it's 1 minus I multiplied by N, and A equals P into 1 minus I to the power of N. Now what do each of these stand for? Sorry, I'm just cleaning this up. Okay, what what does A, P, and I stand for? Well, I'm going to say that A stands for the future value, right? A stands for the future value. It also refers to the final amount. So for example, what it will be in the future, what will be the final value after something has appreciated or depreciated. And then P stands for your initial amount. Initial or original or your present value. The value of something at this moment. And then finally, I is your interest rate.